So the recording has started. So again, this is our Handle with Care presentation. My name is Frank Guglieri. I'm the Regional Safety Coordinator here at Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. We are actively monitoring the chat. We are going to do our best to keep it within an hour, but we do want this to be a back and forth. If anybody has any questions on what Handle with Care looks like or implementation in your district or your county, your school, whatever it might be, we went through the process. We've now been going through this, the three of us together, for a number of years. So we've learned a lot of lessons. We've had some ups, we've had some downs, but we are in a very good place with the program right now. Is it perfect? No, but are we getting better each day? I definitely think we are. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Marla Behler, to start the presentation, so to speak, with a good overview of Handle with Care and working with traumatized children, and then we will, again, go into the nitty and gritty and the nuts and bolts, operations and logistics of the program. So thank you. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I apologize if there's some background noise going on. I'm doing my best to mitigate that a little bit. So basically, the Handle with Care program is just a way for us to support children who have been exposed to trauma through improved communication and collaboration with our first responders, our schools, and our mental health providers. So studies have shown that 1 out of 4 children attending school have been exposed to a traumatic event, and that can affect their learning and their behavior. And as the quote says, when children feel calm and safe, they can really focus their energy on learning. But kids who have been traumatized are just often in crisis, and they're really just trying to focus on feeling okay. So we know that these kids have a lower GPA. They have a higher rate of absences. They're more likely to be suspended or expelled. And these 2 quotes were actually from 2 different children who had a serious history of trauma. So the first one, I found it difficult to hear Mrs. Patterson when she spoke in the classroom. I felt as if she were speaking from beneath tumbling water or from the end of a long tunnel. She assumed I was daydreaming. And the second quote, I could see the math teacher's mouth moving, but couldn't hear a thing. It was as if I were running in a soundless chamber. I just couldn't process a word of it. So for those of you that are familiar with the ACEs study, you know that trauma can impact the child's brain, and also they can have some lifelong health and social issues. So many times, you'll see some of these kids with, some impulsive behaviors. They can't necessarily control their emotions. They may have issues socializing with their peers. And there may be some physical symptoms. They're always going to the nurse with headaches or stomach aches. And sometimes these kids get labeled as, learning disabled, or may have some ADHD. But in fact, it really has to do with their history of trauma. We know that this trauma can affect children differently, and some children are just more resilient, and a lot of that is based on the severity of the trauma or the child support system, which will also influence how they respond. And actually, let me get to the next one. So really, what is being trauma informed? Well, it's really just for teachers and school personnel to be open to the possibility that some of these behaviors or some of the things that are causing these children to act this way may be the result of trauma or something that's going on in that child's life. And it's also a way to help identify these kids and get them the support services that they need. So the child who is maybe falling asleep on their desk, rather than thinking that maybe they were up all night playing video games, on their phone, watching TV, it may be because they were up all night listening to their parents argue. Or the child who didn't get their homework done, maybe it was because they were actually in the hospital all night and they just weren't able to get it done, as opposed to that, label them as just being labeling them as being lazy. So implementing a Handle with Care program is just one tool that can help support schools in becoming more trauma informed. And in doing so, it's also really important that there's training provided. Training provided as far as strategies to managing these kids, and also a process to link them to the available resources, and also a process to identify them. So Frank, I think I'm going to turn it over to Frank, who can talk a little bit about how we got it started in Putnam County and lessons learned and where we are today.
Great, thanks, Marla. So a couple of things, and Marla, if you don't mind, if you want to just stop sharing your screen, because I'm going to share the flyer that we have here in a few minutes. So one of the things that we kind of got started, and Putnam County is unique in a lot of ways, and one of the ways that it's unique is we have 6 school districts and a few private schools, right? So from the school side of it, it's a much smaller lift than some of the other counties. I also work with Northern Westchester, and then Westchester in and of itself, has something like, 30, 40 school districts, which is a little bit more difficult, right? So one of the things that we started, and early on, working with Marla and our law enforcement partners and a lot of other agencies involved were, trying to start somewhere, right? When you're working on this project, it could seem daunting because, you have a bunch of law enforcement agencies, you have a bunch of county agencies, you have other support, agencies that are out and available that are dealing with, children in one way, shape, or form. Maybe you have a localized 911 center, maybe you have many, 911s, it depends, right? So what the things that we did was we looked for targeted groups, and we wanted to build on the existing structures, right? So from the school side, one of the things that we leveraged is we wanted to make sure that when I got the alert, right? So I want everybody to kind of like envision like almost like an hourglass, right? Where the county agencies were the top part of the hourglass and the schools were the bottom part of the hourglass, right? And, like my office, kind of functioned as that choke point, right? Because one of the things that we needed to do is we needed a central person to get the information to, and then we needed another person, another, way to get that information out to the appropriate school districts, right? So we thought that the either assistant superintendent who had supervision over pupil personnel services, or the director, of pupil personnel services would be the natural avenue for that, because they knew every student that had in-district and out-of-district placement. Because one of the concerns that we had in Putnam County, and we also have in Westchester, is, how do we make sure the school district is receiving the information that they need to receive on the student that they actually have? And if they don't have that student, how can we figure out where that student goes to school, right? So the PPS directors have been an incredible resource, because many times if the student is not theirs, they will have information on what the out-of-district placement is, whether the student goes to BOCES, whether they go to a residential program. So we're able to really cut down on the response time of providing the Handle with Care information to the school district, right? So that's one level of implementation, is having that central hub that is connected with the school districts in a variety of ways. Now, for BOCES, that was a natural avenue because we work with our school districts every day. On the other side of it, and Marla, feel free to jump in. At this point, we were looking at the county agencies, and we have Sergeant Kraisky on, who has been an incredible resource for a lot of reasons, right? But especially with Handle with Care, because he oversees the SRO program in Putnam County. But that was one group of one group of people, was the SROs, was the sheriffs. And now we have these other law enforcement agencies that we have to deal with. And I know he's going to talk about law enforcement specifically a little bit later on. But we also had fire, EMS, the Child Advocacy Center, and a number of county agencies that we had to get on board to know that they could contact me with this potential information. So one of the things that we did, and Marla, I'll talk about, the 911 center, and then if you want to talk about those other agencies, I think that would be helpful. We, in Putnam County, they have a singular 911 agency. So someone who calls 911 in Putnam County, and Sergeant Kraisky can correct me if I'm wrong or I misspeak, but basically what happens is it goes to a central location and then they pull out the call to whomever they have to pull out, and then 911 is entering information for the call. So what the 911 center did, what the director of the 911 center did, is he basically built in to their notification, their logging procedure, that if there was a school-age child present or a suspected school-age child present, that the 911 operator would then shoot me an email with the names and the address of those particular children. And that was something that they just built into their normal everyday structure, their everyday reporting, everyday recording. So 911 was a crucial link in this process for us. Marla, do you want to talk a little bit about, the other agencies that are out there that have been contributing to this program?
Sure. So we also, brought our CPS unit on board. It was easy for me for the CAC for those cases, but, a big question came up with our Child Protective Services is the confidentiality issue. And, how do they share that with the school? It's supposed to be confidential, which was also a reason why we went through BOCES and Frank, because that way, when the schools get it, they have no idea who that handle with care notice is coming from. So they don't know it's a CPS report. They don't know if it was, 911 or anything like that. They just know be on alert. And that was a big push. And we're now actually, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, we're also trying to get some of the other like mental health providers in the county on board, and some other just community service agencies to know that this is a tool for them, particularly if you have a clinician who's treating a child and that child is really struggling with something. It's just a way for them to alert the schools, there might be something going on in this child's life that you can be aware of.
Thanks, Marla. And that was, again, I appreciate you highlighting that piece, was the confidence. That's how we definitely, and again, great pickup, how we overcame that confidentiality piece is because basically, whoever the information comes in from, right, that's not translated. All is that translated to the school is, we have a handle with care incoming. And again, it was important for us to identify somebody at the district level to first confirm that, yes, the student is theirs, right? And then to, accept receipt of, that, yes, we have the student, and then we will take it from here. So, I don't provide any additional information, whether it comes from law enforcement, 911, child advocacy, child investigators, right? Like they don't get any of that information. They just get the student. And when we explain it, at the base level to the schools and the school personnel and, their mental health, their counselors, one of the things that we say is, to really be mindful of the spectrum of calls that we get. It could be a call from 911 that a carbon monoxide detector went off in the middle of the night as a false alarm, right? And there was a school-age child present, so I was alerted. I let the schools know. It could be, a kind of, a CPS investigation. Right. It could be that, their house burned down at night. It could be that, grandma who was living with them died overnight and, they were, 911 was called and all these. So there's a variety, a spectrum of things. So we tell the schools it's really, really imperative that they don't read into it. So what I'm going to share with you is just a very, is a flow chart that we've used to, explain it to the schools. And I'll share it also in the chat. So, if you want to download it, you can. Can everybody see the flyer? The one page, thank you. Okay. So, basically what the idea is that, there's some kind of, traumatic event. And, here we're kind of using law enforcement as just like the grabber, and when we update this, we're going to kind of look to put all of our other agencies on here. But this is kind of where we started, right? So that information is coming in to us, to the school district, right? And then, when that goes towards and goes out, right, whoever is on the school end, right, is really known to have like a laissez-faire, like a hands-off policy to the student. They really should just be monitoring the student to see if there's any issues and how the school can support it. But they're not, going forward with any kind of investigations. They shouldn't be probing the child or the family for any information, right? And I will say, as far as I know thus far today, is we've had, really great luck with it, because part of what we did is we brought our school administrators as well as the school mental health teams on board to have individual conversations with them, right, as to what their responsibility, what their onus is in all of this, right? Because this is meant to be a support for the student, right, when they were exposed to whatever traumatic event they were exposed to, and not to really do anything more than just really handle that child with care. So I will stop sharing, but I will share that flyer in the chat. And again, if there's any questions or anything like that, you could always reach out to us because we can explain it. Now, as we're talking about the agencies, I'm going to ask Sergeant Kraisky if he doesn't mind to jump on and kind of talk a little bit about the work that he's really been doing at his end with law enforcement.
Thanks, Frank. One of the things that we were looking at doing was twofold. One, how do we get the information from our responding deputies to a point where we can then pass that information on to Frank? And one of the issues that we were running into when we started trying to collect the information was there was no easy way to have a deputy or an investigator take the information in a concise manner and get it to either myself, my partner, John, somebody that could then put it in an email and get it to Frank. And what we realized was there's an awful lot of legwork involved in this. And if you don't know, when police officers are on a scene, regardless of what it is, domestic dispute, car crash, even a death investigation, there's an awful lot of work involved. There's an awful lot of paperwork involved. So, it's easy for something like this to fall through the cracks. So what we came up with was we are going to utilize a Microsoft form that we are going to push out to each deputy onto their cell phone. Our deputies here have cell phones assigned to them. You guys can see the screen now. I hope the form has 4 questions. You can see the top of the form looks just like this, just juvenile information form. The way I have it set up currently is that anybody with an email address can utilize this form. Our ultimate goal is to push this form out to all law enforcement in the county. And the only thing we're looking for, like Frank was saying before, name of the student, address, date of birth, and school attending, if they know that. The first 3 are really what's most important. If we have the address and the date of birth, we can figure out what school they most likely attend and report it that way. Now, the cool thing is, in the background, when the user hits submit, a bunch of things are happening. One, an email is automatically generated and sent to Frank. So I don't need to do any extra work. Nobody needs to do any extra work. It's all done automatically. And Frank is getting in his inbox an email that has a subject that says handle with care information. And then in the body, very simply, is just the information that's in here: name, address, date of birth. And if there's a school attending, it'll be attached there as well. So that information goes to him immediately. It also gives us the ability to track and keep all this information for tracking purposes. More importantly, on our end as a police agency, we can see and use the information that we get to help the CAC, all the other youth agencies in the county with what are we seeing as far as trauma-related events that juveniles are experiencing, based on not necessarily time and date, but by location as well. So this information we can get pushed out at very minimal effort put in by the reporting deputy. This form takes 28 seconds to fill out. They move on with their day and we're done. That's it. So our goal, we just got it approved actually today. We will hopefully be pushing this out by the end of this week for our deputies to start using.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate it. So with that being said, we talked about the county side. I know I touched a little bit on the school side. You know, one of the other pieces that I will say that's kind of evolved a little bit naturally is the difficulty when you implement a program like this for the school-based mental health counselors and even sometimes the school-based administrators. So, you know I talked a little bit about, you know, how we've trained them and we've done work with them, but sometimes too is, especially what we've seen with COVID, we've had a lot of turnover. So again, you know, trying to use that analogy of the hourglass and that choke point, right, I think is helpful on both sides, because one of the things that, you know, I have had with certain schools is like a reach out, especially if a school hasn't had a handle with care in a while. Or, you know, maybe a district is used to having a lot of handle with cares at the high school, but now all of a sudden, you know, something pops down at the middle school or the elementary school, right? So what I usually tell people is have your counselor or whoever reach out to me, not so that I would provide them with information, but I could give them that, you know, elevator speech, so to speak, of what the Handle with Care program is, what it's meant to do, and what they should be doing with it. I found that, you know, early on in the program, it was a little bit of a heavier lift, and now that everybody is just so used to it, because, you know, when we did this number, and I have to give Marla credit because she always said my math is probably wrong, but you know, I felt like based upon the information that we were gathering, we would have about one call a week, right? And what we're seeing now is around one call every 2 days. At some point, you know, there was a higher point where we were having a call a day, and that was on average, right? Like that was just truly on average. And maybe it's because we're having other agencies come on board. Maybe it's because people are coming out of the pandemic. I don't know, but you know, we have now gotten, like I said, a very, very good system where either I shoot that information out via email or via text to our directors, assistant soups of PPS, and then they just confirm and take it from there. So, you know, it's a little bit of a heavier lift on the front end, but once you get it, then it really just kind of flows like clockwork. You know, I have one assistant soup that we basically deal in this particular district with a call or two a week, and she, you know, she's right on it. I got it, boom, takes it, and then, you know, sends it out to the appropriate school. So that's the generalized overview with Handle with Care. Marla and Matt, I'll you know, pause here for a second. Is there anything else that we're missing before we kind of open it up to a little bit of a Q&A? And I did see a question that just come in, and this is specifically for Sergeant Kraisky. Is this specific to the sheriff's office, or does overlapping departments also participate? So that's a great question.
At the moment, this form is just getting pushed out to the Sheriff's Department. We are planning on presenting this to the rest of the law enforcement agencies in the county once we make sure that all the bugs are worked out and that everything is working smoothly. And then ultimately our goal is to use one form for everybody in the county, regardless of agency. So then everything gets funneled to Frank using just this one Microsoft form.
Great, thank you.
And I know, and just to reiterate, I think it's just, I want to stress the importance that, you know, on the school side of things, that there is some training initially as far as, you know, what it means, what the process is, what the expectations are. You know, we constantly get feedback from some of the teachers and school folks, like, we want more information, we want to know what this means, and we just have to keep reiterating to them, well, that's not what this is about, and this is why. And so it's an ongoing process. It's a lot of conversations, and I also give credit to Frank because he's been really good about scheduling, you know, whether it's quarterly or twice a year, just kind of updates where we invite, you know, all the players on to meet and talk about, you know, what's working, what's not working, what, you know, what are some of the things that we need to work out. And it's also just reminding people over and over again, whenever I'm out in the community or at meetings, it's an opportunity to talk about this program and bring more people on.
Thanks, Marla. Yeah, I will say, you know, early on is definitely that level of training, but, you know, for all of you on here, and I recognize some names, but not all of them, you know, if there's you know, if you have a specific question about rollout, or, you know, even if you need to brainstorm, I mean, you know, you can feel free to reach out, you know, to me, to, you know, to anybody really on the call, but I will put my, you know, email address in here. So you can, again, if you have any questions, we can, you know, try to help you out. We can provide you with some training resources that we used, you know, in the past, and how that worked out. We definitely do the, you know, twice a year meetings, and more often if we needed to. Right now, we feel like twice a year meetings are good. And our friends, you know, in our districts, as well on the agency side, also provide really great feedback. You know, our SROs in the building, you know, if there's something that they weren't aware of, you know, we're able to target like who was involved with the case, and then, you know, maybe where the breakdown in communication comes from. And again, that's why, like, the three of us working together, I think is just very helpful, because if something happens on the law enforcement side, I have Sergeant Kraisky to help me out. If something happens on the county side, I have Marla to help me out. So, you know, we really try to work that coordination, the communication open between all three of us as best as we can. So at this point, what I'll do is I'll pause. And I'll see if anybody has any questions, or, you know, if you'd like to unmute your mic, or just, you know, we're a small enough group here, or if you'd like to post it in the chat, we can try to address them. And again, you know, we're always open for the honest conversation. So if there's anything that, you know, don't feel like anything's off limits, we really, you know, are firm believers in this program. And, you know, we want to help you get it off the, you know, get it off and running. Like what Sergeant Kraisky said earlier on, you know, him piloting it with the sheriff's office, that's another lesson learned for us, right? Like, you can't swallow too much too quickly, because what'll happen is then you'll lose faith or buy-in in the program, right? So I see a question came in the chat. Who is your main therapeutic support for the youth? Nicole, are you talking on the county side or in the school side? On the county side. So I'll defer to Marla on that. I don't know if you know, it might need a little bit more information. I mean, again, you know, for us, it's, you know, the Child Advocacy Center has been the biggest, you know, because obviously Marla's, you know, the director of it, but that's kind of where I defer to.
So I think as far as the support for the children, you know, it really depends on the district, and they're usually, it's first goes to their own clinical staff and their own clinical support team. And then if they need to make referrals outside of the school, then obviously our partner agencies, you know, we have many providers in the county. We have co-care, we have the Women's Resource Center. So, you know, and most of the schools are familiar with the agencies, and, you know, they already have some pretty good partnerships with them.
Thank you. Nicole, does that answer your question? Okay, perfect. Any other questions? I did also drop the PDF in the chat. So, you know, if you haven't seen it, if you want to pull it out and download it, you can have it, you know, so you can use it however you feel you need to use it. I am new to this program, and I'm wondering if parental permission is required for this notice to the schools.
No. I just want to say, because I actually was going to share this earlier. So no, parental permission is not required, because again, we are not providing any information. When the schools get it, they have no idea why it's being referred, you know, if it's a domestic violence situation or an automobile accident. There's no way the school is going to know the difference. So, but what I will say is I recently saw something on social media where a teacher, and this isn't, I don't even think this was in New York State, but a teacher had sent home an email to all the parents of the kids in her class with a very similar concept, just saying, you know, and I wish I had that to share, but just saying that, you know, if you have concerns about your child, if they had a rough night, if something's going on and you want me to be on alert, send me this, handle with care. I won't notice. Just send me an email saying handle with care. I won't ask any questions. So, you know, I think it's kind of neat that this is really picking on, and that, you know, teachers in and of themselves are just, you know, taking it on themselves to offer parents an opportunity to communicate with them on that.
Any other questions?
I actually have a question. Good afternoon. This is all new to me. I'm in Westchester County, so I work with Family Services of Westchester, and we have a new MCRT program we're going to be unrolling within the next month or so with Portchester and Ossining. So, what districts do you deal with in Westchester? Because reporting to a scene and there's a child involved, whether it's the parent having a substance mental issue, this would be something that we would want to utilize to make the district, the school, aware of what's going on. So I'm just trying to, like, what districts in Westchester, if any, is there any police departments that y'all are working with, or how do we get this? How can we get this going?
Sure. So thanks, Angela. So I can address a couple of things for Westchester specifically. So, with Westchester, right? And we, it's a large county. We have a lot of different school districts, a lot of different municipalities, a lot of different agencies. We have presented to a lot of the Northern Westchester districts already. And you brought up Ossining. Ossining was one of them. We had a meeting with a lot of the local law enforcement about 2 or 3 months ago. Marla's counterpart, Danielle from the Child Advocacy Center in Westchester, helped to organize that meeting and is kind of doing some legwork there. We are also working with the Westchester County PD and the Real-Time Crime Center to do something similar to what Sergeant Kraisky is doing up in Putnam County. It's not there yet, but we are presenting to, there's going to be, and for those of you in Westchester and Putnam and some of the surrounding counties, the Pax program, which is the Police and Community and Schools Initiative. It's basically a group of school resource officers, community resource officers, and a number of others, myself included, are having a school safety symposium on April 22nd. And it's not only open to Westchester, it's open, far and wide. But one of the things that we are going to be doing is we're going to be doing a short presentation with Handle with Care to work with the agencies to get on board. Because right now, at least for the districts that I work with in Northern Westchester, we do have the contacts already. So the school infrastructure is in place. We are working to figure out the best way to get the different county agencies on board. So that's kind of where it's lying in Westchester right now, Angela. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
And if you haven't, again, my email's in the chat. If there's anything that, we can do or partner on, please let me know, because I think that, being part of the ongoing conversation, is, and I say this to everybody on here, it's the idea of, keep beating the drum, right? Like, even if you just get one agency on board, right, you have one more agency than you did yesterday, and that was really the big thing for us here. So I just want to, kind of say that to everybody on the call. Thank you. Any other questions, thoughts? Marla, Matt, anything final on your end that maybe we didn't cover?
No, but again, as Frank said, our emails are in the chat. Feel free to reach out. We're happy to, support you in any way we can. I think it's also important, I know just the difference between Westchester and Putnam County alone, like every community is different. So we also recognize, and you need to recognize that what works in Putnam County may not work in your county. So you really have to find a system that, is going to meet the needs of your community.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, again, I want to first thank, Marla and Sergeant Kraisky for being here, being part of this. Marla, thank you for your legwork on putting this together. I want to thank everybody that was able to join us. Again, we will, probably post this to YouTube in a couple of days, but, if you would like a copy, if I'm able to send it, or at least send you the link, please just shoot me an email and I'll make sure that you get it. But I just want to thank everybody for their time and attention today. And if there's anything that any of us can do to help you help implement this program, please let us know. Because one thing I will say is, with all the cases that we've had in Putnam County, that also translated to other counties, right? Because students go out of district, they're having issues in different spots. So, I can't put a number to it, but I would say it was probably around 5 to 10% of cases actually branched out of Putnam County. So that also is helping us in Westchester because it's getting the word out. So, but with that being said, I wish everybody a great afternoon, and thank you for being able to join us here today.